get down with the sickness. Get down with the sickness. Get down with the sickness. Open up your hate and let it open the make. Get down with the sickness. You mama, get down with the sickness. You fucker.
All right, everyone. That's about as much of that song as I can handle. Welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 5 recap. Just finishing up, actually, Week 5. Not, according to my watch here, not too long ago. We actually had a surprise. A last-minute surprise here in one of these matchups. A couple matchups actually ended up being pretty close and came down. I want to say Monday night, but obviously it was Tuesday night this week with all sorts of problems, sickness, COVID problems, hence the opening song, which I know it exists and felt it's not I don't own it. It's not something that I choose to listen to, but it seemed appropriate and angry enough, I think, for all the things that we had to go through the past week or so in fantasy football and just football life in general, I think. So, lots of stuff going on. Is there anything that really needs to be addressed that we didn't already address? I know we voted, even though we kind of already agreed, sort of, and went ahead and last week and did allow people to declare their potential players if the game gets canceled. And we actually had a vote on it, and it was voted in to be instituted from here on out. And I don't really see why it should be an issue. Hopefully, it's not an issue going forward. They get this stuff under control. But I think I said that last week, only to wake up the next morning and have a bunch of COVID-related news. Seems like the last 2 weeks that's been happening here. So hopefully we are able to handle it in the similar fashion that we've already done. You know, if it's a possibility that your game is going to be canceled, especially if it was like tonight, like a Tuesday night, it gets pushed back, there's really no reason why you can't declare other players as long as they are on your roster. You know, if it hasn't happened yet, obviously, if the situation comes up where the game actually gets canceled, I'm sure the NFL is trying as best as they possibly can to avoid actually canceling any games and moving them to later in the year, which I think they basically did that with the Broncos-Patriots game, even though it's being played next week. So there were all sorts of schedule changes too and bye week things going on. So it's a fluid situation that's going to change day to day, week to week. And again, this past week, Possum Magic, he got thrown into a tough situation where he had to drop some players because all of a sudden, as we know, the Broncos and the Patriots were on bye, which he already had a bunch of players on bye. So he had to drop a couple people just to make sure that he had backups. He had no backup if Tannehill hadn't played. Like if the Titans game had actually gotten canceled, he wouldn't have had no quarterback to play because Matthew Stafford was on a bye. So he picked up, I think, Jimmy Garoppolo. Had to make a couple moves there. But again, it's an unfortunate situation because I don't like seeing somebody have to drop a bunch of players to fill their lineup, but that's just the nature of how this season is going to be. We all know what we signed up for. I know it's frustrating, and I don't like having to see that happen. You got suddenly stuck into a difficult situation there for Possum Magic, but he was able to get through it. We'll see how any of those changes affect him going forward. But the good news is a lot of your players have already had their bye week, so you might be pretty good, have a fairly smooth sailing here, at least in terms of your starting lineup and not having any bye week issues going forward. So, yeah, we will manage it from week to week, and hopefully things sort of stop. But I don't think they will. But we will do as best we can. So, and that's all. I hope that I'm trying to do what's best for everybody and the league in general to make things as smooth as possible during all this stuff that comes up. So, thank you all again for, I guess I can't thank you for your compliance on matters, but thank you for being patient and helping things run as smoothly as possible in this confusing year that hopefully we never have to go through again here. So, all right, that should be. I think everybody kind of understands how things are going right now in terms of the COVID stuff and declaring other people in case it's only in case games are actually canceled. So. Your injury problems, those are all as usual, those are all on you there. So, all right, let's get right into the matchups and quit wasting time rambling on about stuff you guys already know, pretty much, right? So, as always, we start with, from Gags to Riches, the defending champion. He going up against Saquon It Ain't So this week, and from Gags to Riches, gets the victory this week. He has 198.65 to Saquon It Ain't So. He gets 152.6. And Saquon It Ain't So is going to have to change his name to perhaps Dakquan It Ain't So. Combine those names, two names in there, because I just feel bad for you, because you hate to see exactly what happened. Dak Prescott going down, as I don't need to tell you. We all know what happened to him. He's done for the year. After said he's been putting up 80, 70-point performances. The last 3 weeks have been 83, 72, and 87, as you're all well aware again. And he only managed 28 points this week before going out with his unfortunate injury. So we will have to wait and see what Saquon It Ain't So does. He's got Drew Brees as his backup quarterback. 59 points from him this past week, not too bad. But Drew Brees is on a bye this coming week. So Saquon It Ain't So is going to have to find himself a quarterback. Just taking a look at his bench here. Personally, if I was Saquon It Ain't So, I would just get rid of Saquon Barkley there. I know he's in one of your IR spots, but there's really no need to have him there. He's a first-round pick. He can't be a keeper for anybody. He's not coming back this year. I would just drop him, and because you can't, he can't be a keeper. No one can trade you for his rights and try to keep him because he was a first-round pick. So if you have in the future, hopefully you don't, but in the future, you're probably going to put Dak in one of those IR spots because he was your keeper this year, and I assume you might want to have him as a keeper next year, because I think this is your last year for James Conner. But again, if I were you, I would move Dak into one of those IR spots and just drop Saquon and free up one of the other ones just in case you have any problems going forward there. But that's what I would do. I know you probably don't really listen to any of these things, but you know what? Why don't we talk about the person who actually won this matchup? From Gags to Riches. Deshaun Watson goes for 54 4.5 points. His receivers, Cup, Robbie Anderson. I think I was starting to read it. I was mixing Deshaun Watson and Robbie Anderson there into, for some reason, Deshaun Anderson, who I don't even know who Deshaun Anderson is. But anyway, Cup, Anderson, and Tyreek, 11.5, 19.5, 18.5. Running backs, Montgomery and Gaskin. Montgomery just under 19, and Gaskin goes for 20, just over 20. Travis Kelce, almost 25 points. McKinnon in the flex, 2.5 points. All on receptions there for a running back. No rushing stats. I think most of it was back. So that might be a problem for you going forward. You've got a couple of wide receivers there that you could possibly throw into your flex spot. Looks like you've got Kerryon Johnson, but I don't know how much work he's actually been getting there. So McKinnon, we'll see if he's still a viable flex play going forward for you there. Tucker, he gets about 10 points for you. And then the Arizona Cardinals defense at the Jets. Yahoo says 9. The actual total must have been about 18, I'm going to guess, based on your point differences there. So pretty good score, almost 200. We only had one 200-point score. A couple people got pretty close, but in general, this week was actually a kind of low-scoring week across the board for most of us. Saquon, it ain't so. As we said, Dak Prescott, 28, just over 28 points before going out for what will be the rest of the year, unfortunately. We will see how that spills over to the rest of the Cowboys and Andy Dalton, what kind of difference he makes. I expect more Zeke, but I also think that Dalton could be just fine. He's got Cooper, Lamb, Gallup, Schultz, Zeke. All the pieces are there for him to be pretty successful as a backup quarterback. He's got the experience, so who knows what kind of drop-off, if any drop-off, there will be here for the guys who own those other Cowboys there. They are scattered across the league. His wide receivers, Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Golden Tate. 13 for Parker, Juju 6.8 and 8.2 for Golden Tate. Running backs, Ingram and Connor, 5.5, 15.5. Jonnu Smith here on Tuesday night, I should say. He goes for 2 touchdowns, 21 points even. In the flex, you got Henderson, the running back from the Rams, which you paid big money for a couple weeks ago. It's paying up dividends, but unfortunately didn't get you a victory here this week. He looks like he had 2 touchdowns, but 21.8 points. Your kicker, lots good game from him, about 15, maybe 16 points. And then your Colts defense, they had a long touchdown, a kickoff return touchdown, I believe it was. A couple turnovers, but they actually lost and gave up a lot of points there to the Cleveland Browns. Yahoo says 16, and I believe that actually was the correct point total there, 16. So the big difference here, obviously, Dak Prescott going down. Some solid numbers up and down the board here for Gags to Riches. And a couple single-digit scores there for your wide receivers. For Saquon, said 28 for Dak. And you lost by 46. So Dak would have needed, said, about a 70-point performance again this week. Don't know if he would have actually been able to do that. But that game ended up kind of being a shootout. So this matchup, if Dak stays in, that might have been close. But who knows? We will never know. Unfortunately for Saquon, it ain't so. He drops to 2-3. He's currently in, well, I don't know exactly. The places are not set yet because I'm doing this here Tuesday night. The game just ended not too long ago, so the standings have not been updated yet. Usually they are by now, so I'm not exactly sure what everybody's position is in the standings as of right this moment. But Gags, he is up to 4-1, while said Saquon so drops to 2-3. All right, maybe by the time we're done with this, the standings will be updated, and I can give you a quick rundown. All right, next up, we had the Springfield Isotopes going against Mighty Midgets, and this one, as close as it seems, it was decided on Monday night there with Alvin Kamara getting the Isotopes just ahead of the Mighty Midgets. Fortunately, just enough, because even though the Isotopes still had the Buffalo Bills defense left to play, they only scored 3 points. So, fortunately for them, Kamara was able to get enough on Monday night there to put the Isotopes ahead without the possibility. I was just talking to Justin about this a little bit ago. The lowest possible score for a defense is -3, which very rarely happens, but it can happen. And I thought to myself, well, once Alvin Kamara got me about 4.5 points ahead of Jim, the Mighty Midgets there, it's like, well, even if worst case scenario, somehow Buffalo scores -3, I've still got the win secured here. So, and the Buffalo sure looked like they were trying to get me that -3 tonight here. But anyway, as dismal as this matchup was in general, a win is a win. The Isotopes 151.9 to Mighty Midgets 144.6. Isotopes have Patrick Mahomes go for 57. Receivers Ridley, Fuller, and Deontay Johnson. 21.5 for Ridley, 15.8 for Fuller. And Johnson again goes out early in the game with an injury. Actually gets less than 1 point. He got 0.8. Running backs Kamara and Nyheim Hines with no Aaron Jones this week. Just under 20 for Kamara and 5 for Hines. Greg Olsen, tight end, only 3 points. Higgins in the flex, 10.2. Kicker was Suckup from Tampa Bay. He went for he actually got about 15 points. Had a pretty good score there. But again, Yahoo says actually says 0, but it was 3 from yardage there for the Buffalo Bills defense. Just enough to squeak past the Mighty Midgets this week, who had Matt Ryan at quarterback continuing his cold spell. He hasn't thrown a touchdown since very early in week 3. And here we are heading into week 6. Only 29.2 for Matt Ryan. Probably the biggest difference maker in this matchup, in a 7-point matchup here. Your quarterback only goes for 29. Much lower than the average score there. Wide receivers, Hopkins, Lamb, and Cobb. Hopkins goes for 25, Lamb 20.5, and Cobb 10.5. Running backs, Mixon and Gibson, 15.5, 10.1. Zach Ertz, your tight end, he only goes for 1.5 points. If you had started Jimmy Graham this week, you would have been a winner. Just comment on that because as I fondly remember, you are the one who stole him from the waiver wire bidding process from me whenever I tried to get Jimmy Graham there. But you left him on your bench this week, and you would have won. We will get... if you're at this point in the video, you've probably already noticed the benches this week were an ongoing theme across several of these matchups here. Let's see. In the flex, you had Curtis Samuel. He goes for 11.5. Robbie Gould goes for about 5.5. And then the Chicago Bears defense, Yahoo says 12. I believe it was actually 15. So yeah, 2 not so great scores, pretty mediocre. A lot of the times, 151 is not going to get you a victory. This week it was enough. Said a lot of teams had kind of lower scores this week than normal for whatever reason across the board here. But yeah, I would say the biggest difference here, obviously, is Matt Ryan with under 30. He gets you 40, which is a pretty normal, I would say, quarterback score. Pretty standard. You get the victory this week. Of course, Deontay Johnson. Who knows what happens in that game if he plays and doesn't get hurt? Because obviously we know what happened with Chase Claypool there, with Johnson out. But yeah, I remember I was watching that game, and I believe Deontay Johnson, because I was worried about him, see what happens with him. They had him back on 2 punt returns in the first quarter there, and I'm watching him on the first punt return. He just got drilled hard, and like, good grief, like the Eagles defenders looked like they were trying to take his head off. I was like, oh my god, he's gonna get hurt returning these punts. And then said he caught that pass, went backwards, and I think Darius Slay ran up and gave him a good shot. And then on the next punt return, not too much later, he got drilled again, like several Eagles hitting him all at one time. And I was like, oh my god, I watched it happen. And then as they were cutting to a commercial, you could see he starts to get up, and then Deontay goes back down on the ground, and he's like, oh, I'm like, oh god, he's hurt again. But at least it wasn't another concussion, like for fantasy's sake, but more so for his sake. You don't want to see, I mean, he's the one who I think last year had a crazy concussion hit from, I think it was the Cleveland Browns, if you may remember. He was kind of, I don't know if the pass was over his head or something, like he wasn't able to make the catch, but he was like falling to the ground. He was defenseless, and the Browns guy came in and just hit him right inside of the head, and I think he actually like spun around before he went to the ground. You might remember that. So hate to see Deontay getting another concussion last week. Thankfully for his sake that he didn't get another one this week and be out for who knows how long here. So hopefully he's going to be okay. But that's it for this matchup. Yeah, a couple things could have gone differently, and it would have gone the other way. But in a week here where a lot of the matchups were actually kind of close, that's just the way it goes. The Isotopes actually remain undefeated. They are 5-0, and the Mighty Midgets, they dropped to 1-4, unfortunately. Let's see. I'm not even sure yet who got eliminated from the knockout pool. Actually, it looks like Mighty Midgets, because Possum Magic outscored him by 0.15. Here, this is actually the first I'm looking at it, thinking about the knockout pool, because I thought it was probably going to be Possum Magic, but it looks like it actually, unfortunately, it was the Mighty Midgets this week here. Just barely. All right. This matchup came down to some Tuesday night drama. Yinzer Jags versus Darkwing Jut. Yinzer Jags was finished with 199.4. Darkwing Jut had about, let's see, 190-ish. Let me see. He had Devin Singletary from the Bills here on Tuesday night. He got 4.5 points. So yeah, your score must have been, I think it was about 189.3, I think, something like that. So Darkwing Jut only needed 10.1 from Singletary on Tuesday night to get ahead of Yinzer Jags and steal a victory here. And unfortunately, Singletary was only able to go for 4.3. Talked about it a little bit earlier today on the lineup. Said Singletary only needed, 10.1, which he had been over that. 3 out of 4 games this year so far, he was over that total. So it was looking pretty good for Darkwing Jut here this week. But unfortunately, Buffalo just completely shit the bed this week. I don't know what was going on. The whole team was terrible. They were out of it from pretty much from the get-go. Kind of surprising. I really thought it was going to be the other way around, seeing as how the Titans had to deal with all the COVID nonsense and the mess going on. And they weren't able to really get together and practice and game plan together. I assume everything had to be um, digital over Zoom and stuff like that, meetings and stuff during the past 2 weeks. Thought maybe they would be, and said they lost a lot of players who were currently out for COVID-related things like that. Really just thought that they would be out of sorts and unprepared for this game, even though they should have been well rested. But turns out that I was completely wrong, and the Titans pretty much just steamrolled right over the Buffalo Bills on this night. Unfortunately for Darkwing Jut, his hopes were in the hands of the Buffalo Bills, and Singletary, he was not able to come through for you this week. Yinzer Jags, the victor, 199.4 to 193.65. Yinzer Jags has Kyler Murray go for 59. His receivers, Thielen, Cooper, and Boyd. Thielen goes for 29.5, picking up the slack from Cooper and Boyd, who go for 4 and 8, respectively. Mostert comes back and gets you 15 points. Latavius Murray, since there was no James White this week, he got you 7.7. Kittle only 8.5 after his big explosion last week. Ebron in the flex goes for 7.3. Blankenship, your kicker, about 11 points or so. And then, big one here, your Baltimore Ravens defense. Yahoo says 31, but I believe the actual score was about 49, something like that. Actually, both your teams here in this matchup, your defenses put up big scores here. 49 is a big score for your defense for Yinzer Jags here. We'll see exactly what Darkwing Juts was, but they kept pace at least and kept you in this matchup here. For Darkwing, Teddy Bridgewater goes for 54. Beckham Jr., 12.5. DJ Moore, just over 19. And Robert Woods, just over 17. Drake and Singletary, 13.2 for Drake. And again, Singletary, 4.3. You needed 6 more points from him. We were just talking about it at the end there to get some garbage time. Singletary maybe punch in a touchdown at the end of the game there. And then, like, moments later, TJ Yeldon gets the touchdown. Like, where did TJ Yeldon even come from? Haven't spoken that name in quite a while. So unfortunately for Darkwing Jet, didn't quite go his way this week. Tight end Gazicki goes for 14. In the flex, he went with Russell Gage this week, who got you 3.6. Should comment that this is the first lineup change Darkwing Jet has made all year. Well, besides his quarterback position, I believe, his lineup has been exactly the same ever since Cam went out with his COVID stuff. He's had Bridgewater in there. But other than that, Darkwing Jet has had Michael Gallup in there in the flex every single week. This week, decided to get a little cute. Julio Jones is out. I'm going to start Russell Gage. Hope for a good score from him. In theory, not a bad idea. But when you start tinkering with your lineup, bad things happen. And Michael Gallup scored about 7.5 points more than Gage did, which would have been enough to get you the victory this week, Darkwing Jet. But unfortunately, you went the other way and put Gage in your lineup. Kicker Fairbairn goes for about 14 or so, and the Rams defense, already mentioned them. Yahoo says 14, but you're actually jumped way up here from what Yahoo says, almost 30 points. So I'm going to guess it must have been about 28, which would put them at 42, low 40s there. So, like I said, the Rams defense kept you in this matchup, kept pace with Baltimore. Really up and down. Darkwing Jets lineup. He had some better scores there. So the big one was probably Thielen catching a second touchdown there. The difference was only just under 6. So yeah, that touchdown there hurts. Cooper and Boyd didn't do too much. Murray, Kittle, Ebron, all those guys didn't do too much. But unfortunately, since Singletary and Gage were not able to pull you ahead and get you the win this week here. But Darkwing Jet, even with a loss, you're at 3-2, not too bad. Yinzer Jags, he moves to 4-1. Let's see. This matchup, well in hand before any, I think, of the Monday or Tuesday games here. Hillbillies on PCP. He was trying to get his first victory going up against Disco this week. And Hillbillies on PCP. The 0-4 Blues. We won't be singing the 0-5 Blues as Hillbillies get the victory this week. The only 200-point score, 203.65 to Disco, only 137.85. For Hillbillies, Ben Roethlisberger, 50.5. Keenan Allen, DK Metcalf, and Jefferson from the Vikings, 11, 27.5, and 5.5, respectively. Dalvin Cook looks like he got hurt in that game. Not sure how serious it is. He might miss a week or two because I believe the Vikings have a bye coming up here. So they might hold him out for a week and see how he goes. Let him heal. Taking a quick look here. The Vikings have one game here versus Atlanta in week 6, and then they have a bye in week 7. So I wouldn't be surprised if they sit Dalvin Cook and give him the extra week of rest here. So I don't know how serious his groin injury is, but I'm sure it made the Mighty Midgets happy, or at least chuckle a couple times, knowing that he once again has Madison on his bench there. But Cook did get you 20 points before going out there. Jacobs, 22.5. Hunter Henry, 12.5. Slayton in the flex, 21 points from him. Zerline goes for about 14, 13.5 or 14. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers defense gave up a lot of yards and stuff, had a couple sacks, couple turnovers. Yahoo says 11. The actual score must have been about 20, I'm going to guess. So, not too bad there. Over 200. Yes, the only 200-point score this week. A couple people got real close. Fairly consistent with Hillbillies on PCP. As he's mentioned over and over again, he keeps scoring pretty good up near that 200-point barrier. This week he was able to break it and get his first victory. As for Disco, he has Joe Burrow go for 24.15. Speaking of Disco, I don't know what to say this week. Your wide receivers, AJ Green, Scotty Miller, and Olamide Zacchaeus from the Falcons here. 0 for Green, 0 for Scotty Miller, 2.3 for Zacchaeus. So that means your 3 wide receivers on average scored about 0.8, less than 1 reception. That's probably, it has to be, the lowest wide receiver trio total of all time. So congratulations to you, I guess, on that accomplishment. Not much went right for you this week. Miles Sanders, he had that 75-yard touchdown run, but that was pretty much his entire day because he did score another touchdown, got you a bonus there with his long touchdown. but I see he only had 80 rushing yards, and 70 plus of them came on that one run there. So he got you just about 27 points. The other running back was Taylor from the Colts. He goes for 15.5. Waller goes for 15.8. Zeke goes for 23.5, 2 touchdowns from him. Bailey, your kicker, goes for about 12 or so. And then the Tampa Bay defense, Yahoo says 12. It was probably about 18, something like that. But yeah, not much to disco, really very little to nothing you could have done this week. Of course, though, as we are well aware, your bench wide receivers would have gotten you all the points necessary to get the victory this week are there on your bench. And it's already been discussed a little bit on the lineup. I don't want to pour salt into your wounds. You're already upset about it enough as it is, I'm sure. And said you had a possible wide receiver trio of Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks, and Chase Claypool. Claypool had 42. Williams had 28. Cooks had 33. So that is what? 60, over 100 points from that wide receiver trio. But I can sit here and say, oh, it's obvious things you could have done differently in your matchup here, knowing what has already happened. So, and I say it all many times before, no need to really repeat on it. It's easy to sit here and look back on it and kind of chuckle and laugh and say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? But you thought you were doing what was best. Those scores are perhaps anomalies that won't happen again, especially Claypool. That was like a record-setting, historic performance from him. But we will see how it goes. See how he does going forward there. But yeah, Disco, just really, I don't know what to say this week. But yeah, a lot of points left on benches this week. So hence, as you already are aware, this week's review photo. Yeah. So Disco, he falls to 2-3. Hillbillies on PCP actually moves up to 1-4. Don't know if he's probably not in the basement anymore because there are other 1-4s, and as he has made us well aware, his point total is pretty high. Probably gained ground on a lot of people this week in terms of overall point total with his 200 points there. But yeah, not much you could do for said Disco this week. 200 point score for Hillbillies, and the lowest. Maybe Josh can put this in the records somewhere. Maybe look up and see what the previous trio of wide receivers' low score was without any injuries, really. Although AJ Green, I think he kind of went out with injury in that game. I wonder if, because people were talking about, and I've seen it already too, the video of him with an interception floating over his head, and then in pursuit of the Baltimore Ravens guy who was running back, I think it was Marcus Peters, running back the interception there, and kind of almost looked like he stopped and decided to block his put blocks against his own team there. But I assume it had something to do with he's got a hamstring injury there. I believe that's what they said he went out of the game with. So that's my guess. It's much more likely he was trying not to get further injured in his pursuit, his lackluster pursuit of, I think it was Peters in that interception return there. So, but either way, it was pretty entertaining to watch and get a good laugh about there. So, Disco, I'm certainly sure is not laughing about it. But anyway, yeah, let's move on to the next matchup. WC Hooligans versus Shawshank Athletics. Shawshank trying to avoid also going 1-4. Dubsy Hooligans were trying to go to 4-1, but Shawshank, I should say, pulls off the semi-upset this week, as Dub C was actually on a roll going into this week. Shawshank gets the victory, 175.65 to 166.45 for Dub C. Shawshank has Gardner Minshew go for almost 57 points. His wide receivers, Debo, T.Y., and Chenault. Only 4.2 for Debo, 13 for T.Y., and 15 for Chenault. Running backs, Gurley and Freeman. A Atlanta running back and the former Atlanta running back. Gurley goes for 28, Freeman 16.5. Some good scores there. Andrews, your tight end, goes for 17.5. Evan Engram in the flex goes for 9.5. Gostowski on tonight here, Tuesday, only all PATs. He's got 6 of them, 6 points. And then the Saints defense last night on Monday night got you the victory. I don't know if you were actually behind or this matchup was really close. If we cut the 6 points away, that takes you to 160. Excuse me, 169. So you were actually behind going into Monday night by a little bit. I think the Saints defense actually got you 9 points and bumped you just a little bit ahead. And then Gostowski, his 6 points put you 9 points ahead there. So you were, you got about 3. It would have taken Gostowski to miss 4 kicks and make none this week to get you a loss here. But I don't think that's ever happened. I believe the actual, as crazy as this sounds, I think the actual, if you go back and look in our Tonto's record book there, I think the lowest kicker score we've ever had is somehow -3. I think it was for Jimmy the Wolf one year. I don't know who his kicker was, but I think it was -3. I'll have to go back and look there. But fairly even matchup here. But again, Shawshank was able to get just ahead with his defense, and then Gostowski putting some further distance between himself and Dub C Hooligans. Dub C has Russell Wilson go for 45.5. Allen Robinson, 19. Chark, only 4.5. Crowder, 25.5. Robinson and Edwards-Helaire. Robinson goes for 10. Helaire, 11. Schultz, your tight end, he only goes for 1.6 after putting up some solid numbers the past few weeks here. Mike Davis, another good performance from him. Didn't want to say another 30-pointer. But actually, this was his best performance so far since replacing Christian McCaffrey. Just under 30 points there for him. Dub C is going to miss him when he's gone, which is probably not this coming week, but perhaps the week after. Week 7, I think, is probably when McCaffrey will be coming back there. But I'm sure Davis is going to play a role for the rest of the season based on his performance here. They're not going to want to force McCaffrey back and perhaps into too much action too soon if he's not ready, and if Mike Davis is obviously playing pretty well here, so in his place. Kicker, you picked back up Koo from the Falcons. He gets you about 14 points. And then surprising one here, perhaps a difference maker in this matchup. You end up being forced to play the San Francisco defense because New England, as we know, suddenly went on bye. And surprisingly, in San Francisco, the Miami Dolphins run all over them, score 43 points. Yahoo says only 2. I believe 5 was the actual point total there for the San Francisco defense there. And it said in a matchup that was only a 9-point difference here, you probably expected a little bit more, especially against the Dolphins there, from your San Francisco defense. I think Chark got hurt in that game. Maybe that affected his point total. It's at only 1 point from Schultz here. So a bunch of, again, all sorts of little things that could have gone differently. Said 45, kind of a low score from Russell Wilson. His lowest score of the year, actually, by about 5 points here. So all the little things we could go over and talk about how what could have been, would have been, should have been. But the results are the results here. Shawshank, he goes to 2-3, while Dub C Hooligans drops to 3-2. And our last matchup, the best matchup of the week. This one, Possum Magic versus Ed Lager. And I didn't actually see what the outcome of this matchup was till I got home from work because I was kind of watching the game there. Phone battery died, had to come home, charge it up, game was already over. So I got on my computer here to see what had happened. And Possum Magic squeaks out a victory. Final score 144.75 over Ed Lager in a heartbreaker, 143.1. So Ed Lager, he was finished after last night. He had Josh Kelly from the Chargers there. Got him 4.8 points in his flex there. He also had Traquan Smith. Surprisingly quiet game in substitution of Michael Thomas, as we all know. But he only got 2.8 there. So some surprisingly low performances in a game that really ended up being very much a defensive struggle for most of the game there for Ed Lager here. But yeah, so I guess I think kind of mentioned it before talking about the knockout pool. I thought Possum Magic was going to be knocked out this week because he was down around 50 points and trying to figure out what his total was that he needed with Ed Lager being finished. I think he needed about 90 points or so. And so I thought to myself, well, that means he needs Tannehill to go for 50, and he needs about 20 each from Diggs and Henry. 20 from Diggs and 20 from Henry. Those are definitely achievable scores, but 50 plus from Tannehill, yeah, that's asking a lot. But he did it. And I believe it came down to really an unnecessary garbage time touchdown from the Titans there. Because the final score was 42-16, so it must have been 35-16 with just a few minutes left in that game. And Tannehill's last pass of the game, I believe, was his second touchdown to Jonnu Smith, and that was the dagger that put Possum Magic ahead of Ed Lager here by 1.5 points. Perhaps saves Possum Magic's season and gets him the victory. So yeah, he got 90 plus points he needed from Tannehill, Diggs, and Henry. Tannehill was actually at 52.95. Possum's wide receivers, McLaurin only 5.5, Tyler Lockett only 8.5, but then Diggs got 20.5, Chris Carson just under 20, Henry actually 19.3, so right around 20 there. Tight end Hurst goes for 2.8. Had to put in the flex Brian Hill, running back from the Falcons this week. He got you 7.5 points here. Just taking a quick look at Possum Magic's bench, he had Harris, Gordon, Marvin Jones, Stafford, Patrick on bye. Had Preston Williams. Actually would have been a good play too if you would have been forced to play him in the flex. This matchup would not have been nearly as close. But fortunately for you, this game was not canceled because you would have been forced to play Garoppolo at your quarterback, and he only scored 4.85. So, but yeah, your kicker, Bullock, goes for about only one field goal, 3.5 points from him. And then the Chiefs defense, after a big performance last week, they got throttled by the Las Vegas Raiders. Yahoo says 4, and I want to say that was the correct score. Maybe, yeah, because your score only goes up about 0.5 point there from what Yahoo says. So 4 must have been the correct score, unfortunately. But yeah, just barely enough to get you past Ed Lager this week. Lamar Jackson, another disappointing point total for him this week, 33.3. The last 4 weeks, Lamar Jackson's point total has been in the 30s every week. He started out the year with a 50-pointer, but yeah, he's been in the 30s every week since. I'm sure you're definitely hoping for more from him this year. Although you do have the Jackson to Hollywood Brown connection. Brown actually got almost 20 points for you. Mike Evans, 15 points, and said Traquan Smith, 2.8 in playing there for Michael Thomas. But looks like the Saints have a bye this coming week, and then you'll have Michael Thomas back going forward. But unfortunately, at 1-4, it might be too little too late. We'll see what happens, though. Kareem Hunt goes for 18.5. David Johnson, a little bit over 12. Austin Hooper, 10.5. Said Kelly in the flex, 4.8. You didn't have the Denver kicker this week, so you picked up the Chargers kicker. He actually missed a couple of kicks. He only got you 1 point. And then the Houston Texans defense, again, I believe you dropped Denver's kicker and their defense. I know you still have Denver's kicker on your bench there. I believe you dropped their defense, picked up Houston. Ended up being a pretty good move there. Yahoo says 16. Actual score must have been about 22 or so. But yeah, excuse me. Anything, very little difference in this matchup. Kind of, I guess, vengeance, I guess, for redemption, maybe, for Possum Magic, seeing as how he got thrust into what seemed like a hopeless situation with all of the sudden bye week COVID issues this past week. Maybe perhaps only fitting that I'm sure we all thought that he was going to lose, but he gets the victory this week. So despite all the hardships, he overcomes them and knocks out Ed Lager. Ed Lager falls to 1-4, while Possum Magic, he is up to 2-3. So let's take a look. Those are all the matchups. Let's take a look if Yahoo has updated it yet. It does not appear so. So I'm not sure exactly what all the standings are. I'm going to say Isotopes still first place. Yinzer Jags probably still in second. Gags probably in third. Those would be the 4-1 teams would be Yinzer Jags, Gags, Jags and Gags, and then Dub C. Those would be only two because Dub C lost and Darkwing Jet lost. Those teams are 3-2, so they would be right behind in 5th and 6th in the standings there. So yeah, it's probably Isotopes, Yinzer Jags, Gags. Those are 3. Then Dub C probably, Darkwing Jet. That's the top 5. And then the rest of the league, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams, sub 500 records right now. But who all is 2-3? Disco 2-3, Saquon 2-3, Possum 2-3, and Shawshank 2-3. 1-4s are Mighty Midgets, Ed Lager, and Hillbillies on PCP. So I'm going to guess Ed Lager drops to the basement this week. But yeah, just taking a quick look here, and assuming we'll see if there's any stat corrections here. But again, with that touchdown from Tannehill right at the end of that game, not only does Possum Magic get a victory, he scoots just ahead of the Mighty Midgets and knocks them out from the knockout pool this week. So, all right, that is pretty much it for week 5. Take a quick peek ahead at week 6. We've got Kitchen of Love battle, Isotopes versus Darkwing Jet. Was kind of hoping Darkwing would get a victory here, so it could be a 5-0 versus 4-1. But unfortunately, it'll still be a tough matchup, a good competitive matchup here, as Darkwing Jet tries to give the Isotopes their first defeat. We got Saquon versus Ed Lager, Disco versus Possum, 2 2-3s there. Dub C versus Yinzer Jags. That'll be a good matchup. Gags to Riches versus Shawshank. Current projections are almost exactly the same. Shawshank trying to get back on track. Gags to Riches tries to keep on rolling. And then Hillbillies on PCP versus Mighty Midgets this week coming up. That's going to be an important matchup. Hillbillies said he probably won't have Dalvin Cook, while Mighty Midgets could very possibly throw Madison out there in his starting lineup this week, especially against that Falcons defense. Thing to say about this matchup is both teams are 1-4. So Hillbillies versus Mighty Midgets. Whoever loses this matchup is going to be 1-5. Somebody is going to be 1-5. And that is a really, really difficult spot to be in. I was talking a little bit to Jim before. He's kind of in desperate situation here, trying to keep his season and his hopes alive here. But one of you in this matchup is going to drop to 1-5, a position none of us wants to be in here. I don't think anybody else is in that guaranteed position to fall to 1-5. Said Ed Logger could, but he's got Saquon and 8 so who's 2-3. Everybody else I think is there's only 3 teams that are 1-4, and 2 of them play each other this week. So that'll be interesting to watch to see who gets put into a really, really difficult situation going forward here. We'll see if Darkwing can knock off the Isotopes. And we got some good matchups. Looking forward to seeing what happens here moving forward. So that's it for week 5. Again, Mighty Midgets are eliminated this week from the knockout pool. So that makes Mighty Midgets, Ed Blogger, Saquon and 8 so, Shawshank, and Disco are the 5 teams eliminated from the knockout pool here, right? Disco, Ed Logger, Shawshank, Saquon, and Mighty Midgets here. So, all right, that is about it. Hopefully we don't have as many COVID issues this week coming up. And as always, in week 6, looking forward to being back here next week and talking about what happened. Hopefully everyone's players and everybody's teams meet or exceed expectations this coming week. And we have some great matchups. Nobody gets injured. And we're back here talking about a great week next week, this time next week here. So, all right, guys, thanks for listening or watching or whatever it is you do, if however many of you actually make it this far or whatever. So, all right, once again, thank you, and we will see you back here perhaps next week. Bye-bye.